skin. And again, I ask myself, why? Why am I doing this? There's an impulse. There's a calling. There's a guidance that suggests it serves more than one purpose. It's beneficial to me, my mental well-being, to have an outlet, to express myself. There's also a feeling of creating a historical record that anyone really has the right, even perhaps a responsibility, to record their perspective, their story, and share it. Perhaps it will be saved for future generations. It seems unlikely, but it is possible. If we think about all the historical writing, all the records that ever were written, carved into a piece of clay, written on papyrus, written on scrolls and books, some of it survived. And even if it's just a small fraction, there's something valuable in it. Even a recording from the most lowly, humble person has time-sensitive relevance to it. The things that we take for granted, the things that we assume, maybe even things that we don't, depending on the writer, the recorder. Those things may seem especially interesting to other people in other times, in other places. I think it's easy to not appreciate our current lives They may seem mundane and ordinary. But it's just because we're in them. Some people have the ability to see things in a broader perspective. And a strange paradox is that to do that, you're not as engaged, such as with myself. I'm not living the life that I believe that a lot of people are living, although there's certainly lots of overlap. But I think my life has some unique attributes to it, which give me a kind of luxury, although it often doesn't feel like luxury. It feels like pain and suffering, but that pain, those conditions, that experience causes me to look at things in a different way. I think this is the benefit of pain, actually, is it forces us out of something, forces us to adapt. And I think when our mental frameworks are outworn, they're not useful, they're too small for us, they become painful. It's kind of a growing pain. And I felt this pain for much of my life. It's been a constant encouragement to think bigger, broader, deeper, and higher. Things like blaming other people never solved anything. It didn't relieve any pain. It just made me feel powerless. It seemed like it was the situation. And on one level it is, where there's other people that are doing something, they're in our life, and it feels oppressive, it feels harmful. But on another level, we're giving them that power. And it's that level that that pain is encouraging us to reach for. The only way out of that pain is to see it in a new way. And maybe that is seeing the way out, seeing the way of changing one's life. Maybe somebody thinks they're stuck in a marriage or a job or a town, and that pain encourages them to think beyond those constraints. Something I've noticed that for a time, and it's very tempting always, is to use things to satiate ourselves to distract from the pain. It's usually some kind of pleasure seeking that temporarily distracts us from the pain. And when we're on that trajectory, we're always thinking about how to get that pleasure, how to get something that feels good. Seems like much of the world is designed that way. Much of our society is designed that way. There's these layers. There's the survival function, which has a legitimacy. But most of us are not just trying to survive. That's a layer there. And that can be activated when we're afraid. It's going to activate that survival instinct to do whatever is necessary and shut down some higher functions. But that's not often rational calculation, because usually it's not a survival situation. We can see kind of the worst case scenario where people that are homeless, no money, they don't die. I'm sure they feel uncomfortable. But for most of us, it's a long way down. It's a long way before we get to that place. Things have to go pretty wrong to get there. But I think what goes wrong is a number of things. It's a pathway of disempowerment, where we're giving up agency in our lives, where we're believing narratives that we picked up along the way. The thing is we think that we know what's what. And sometimes we make some pretty bad decisions based on a sureness that is actually often erroneous. We're quick to make conclusions about things. And we're rushing because of a kind of survival consciousness that we've got to manipulate and grasp. We've got to deceive. We can't be honest. We can't trust, because the world is too dangerous. Survival of the fittest, and you got to compete. Personally, I find it quite nauseating when I feel that from people. I feel this grasping. I observe them being inauthentic and manipulative, and I sense from them this great unease within. They don't feel safe. They feel deprived. It's like an animal backed into a corner, and they're not even aware of it. There's certainly times when I feel like that. Certainly times when I feel deprived of something, wanting, hungry. I felt that a lot. But I think there's a difference when you just feel the discomfort and when you try and avoid it. Because it's in the trying to avoid it, to quickly fix it, that we end up doing things that perpetuate that feeling of deprivation. It's always a kind of band-aid, and it doesn't really address the root issue. What I see as the root issue actually is a deeply spiritual one. I believe the source of everything good, everything that we want, actually is within us. That feeling that we're longing for is a connection to the divine. Connection to the source of all good things. And it's ever present. It's within us. This whole world is a projection. Not that it's not real, it's as real as anything is. Anything that we give validity to. And that's the thing that we need to remember, is that we empower all of these external symbols. We give everything that we perceive legitimacy to varying degrees. We give these things our power. When we recognize that we're doing that we're believing in this projected world, we start to reclaim our power. Just doing that, we start to feel a sense of satisfaction. But often first is really feeling that pain, really feeling that suffering. I mean, there's a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is just a sensation. And suffering is our emotional response to it. And I suppose our mental response as well, when we perseverate, when we worry, and that creates a kind of loop of that emotional and mental projection. I have to recognize that we're creating that. Really, the stuff outside of us is neutral. And actually, you can witness the world in a neutral way. It's the same technique that's used in meditation. It's just an observing. Even observing your emotions and your thoughts. If you can hold that center of awareness, if you can feel that third eye center, then you can start to just observe things. It doesn't mean you don't have thoughts or feelings. It's just they start to slow down and become subtler. It's like you're not on the roller coaster anymore, you're just observing it. And sometimes when you're observing it, you get, all of a sudden you're on it again. And you have those hungers and those cravings because it's uncomfortable and you want to ameliorate some of that discomfort. This world is full of distractions, and we are kind of taught that that's what we're here for, is to be distracted. There's a lot of validation of that story because it's been utilized to benefit people at the expense of others. But I think eventually we grow out of it. And maybe that's the design, is that it's uncomfortable. So that we do give up. Much of this world doesn't make sense. Much of the human systems and all of that human-made world doesn't make sense. There's a lot of conflicting ideas. And I think it only starts to make sense when we slow down and introspect. We question things. Personally, I feel like the whole world is being encouraged to do this right now. Things are at a crisis point in many ways. My feeling is that people are on the verge of there's a lot of things. So it could be spiritual breakthrough or mental breakdown. I think a lot of the systems that people have believed in and counted on are crumbling. They're crumbling from the inside, and then suddenly it will become obvious. And that's going to be shocking for people. And I don't think everybody will have the resilience. I don't know if I will. Ask myself, what's the point? What's the point of surviving? What do I want out of this life? The fact that I don't have a lot of the things that keep other people here, keep people believing in the normal human existence. I don't have those things. I don't have children. I don't have a partner. I don't even have a pet. I could have one, but for me, it doesn't make sense. I'd love to have all of those things, but in a way I'm too rational, I think. I don't know exactly what it is. I couldn't take on that responsibility and not fulfill it. I couldn't go to work and leave a pet locked in an apartment all day for weeks and weeks. It just doesn't seem right to me. There's a lot of mental constraints that I have. And sometimes I wonder where the benefit is, because they've caused me a lot of suffering. To see the world the way that I do has caused me a lot of pain. But because of that, it's also encouraged me to look for answers. And the premise that I have about that is that they're all things that lead me to a broader perspective. And that's really what I value above all, is to understand myself, to understand reality, and also to understand God. Truly have a connection and find true satisfaction. That ache inside is a directive. It is a beckoning. And it shouldn't get distracted by a substitute. Maybe that's why it's said that it can take millions of incarnations to achieve enlightenment. Because there's many substitutes for enlightenment along the way. And not that that is a failure or wrong or bad. But is a slowing down of progress. And every moment that atonement isn't achieved, there's a longing, there's an emptiness and a sadness that sure we can pretend we don't have. We can distract ourselves from that awareness. Temporarily. But it's always there until we lock our gaze on the source. I think that it's probably the nature of human existence that we're going to be flawed. We're not going to get it right, no matter how hard we try. It's just the nature of human incarnation. But it is important that we try. It is important that we aspire. And not be satisfied with the substitute. And only we can determine that. Nobody else can say to what degree we're doing a good job of it. If they do, we don't need to listen to it anyways. What's important is that we have that inner dialogue. That's what keeps us on that path, is that inner dialogue. And yeah, when we hear that inner dialogue and we observe the outside world, that contrast can be very disconcerting. Why does the world not reflect what I feel to be true? But honestly, I think that's a real waste of time. It's only useful if we're thinking about solutions. And what I mean by that is essentially coming around to what I started with, where we make an effort. And it is an effort. It's not easy to translate this into the world of constraints and judgments. But the point is, that we can leave some breadcrumbs for other people. We can encourage them to question reality if they're interested, if they're ready. We can help them it's a mysterious dynamic because it's all up to interpretation. It's us interpreting what is a worthy offering, and then them interpreting it as worthy, how they interpret it. They, for example, if somebody were to see this 100 years from now, they might think that it was irrelevant. Or they might think that it was very relevant. They're going to perceive it through their own framework. But the hope is there's at least a morsel of catalyzing information. And it doesn't have to be 100 years from now, it could be right now. I mean, I think the whole social media thing, it has this great potential. I think the internet is great. It's a reflection of something that already exists. It's a further similar reflection of the network that underlies everything, that's manifest in nature everywhere, with branches and trees, with lightning. It's just something natural. Of course, the human mind, it's reductive, and again, I don't think that's wrong. It just loses some bandwidth in the process. So we have to use that information as a touchstone to remind ourselves to open an internal doorway. So it's a map, it's not the territory. Without the map, we might not go on the adventure. So I think that's what I'm attempting to do. Is to draw a map of my own exploration. And maybe somebody else will find it useful. This certainly isn't about making money or fame or anything like that. I have no I have very little desire for either of those. Money, perhaps a little more than fame, but honestly, I'm not very driven by money either. I'm driven by that calling, the desire for peace in achieving that attunement, that alignment with the divine.